Hi, I'm Catherine and I'm going to be your teacher for today. Here at Prime Pass, we have put together some really fun and easy videos for you to create a masterpiece in the comfort of your own home. So get comfortable, pour yourself a drink, put on some music, and let me show you the art materials. So you will need to use 12 tubes of acrylic paint. You will need your 2 paint brushes, a smaller brush and a larger brush. You'll have your 8" by 9" canvas board. You will have your paint palette for you to pour your paints on and to do your mixing. You will also need some kitchen towel, a cup of water and a kitchen sponge. In this tutorial, we're going to be painting Umbrella in the Rain, which is a very well-suited painting if you're living in rainy England right now. It's just a few colours and a few simple, easy steps to create this masterpiece. So let's get started. So when you have all your materials set up in front of you, we can start preparing our paint palette. For Umbrella in the Rain, we'll be using black, blue, red and white. So we can start off by squirting each colour onto our palette. You can spread out your colours across your palette, you don't have to bunch them up. So you have plenty of space for mixing. Okay, now we're ready to start painting. Okay, so now I'm just going to put my palette to the side and I'm going to bring in my canvas. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take our kitchen sponge and I'm just going to dip it into my water to get it nice and damp, and I'm just going to squeeze off the excess water. And then I'm going to choose one side of my sponge and I'm going to dip into the white just on one side, and then on the other side I'm going to dip into the blue. So one side will be white, one side will be blue. And then I'm going to use upward strokes and I'm going to fill my canvas. I'm going to be quite kind of free with my strokes. So these don't have to be kind of perfect lines going up and down. So I'm going to dip back into the white and back into the blue. And I'm going to add some fresh layers of paint. And after this, we're going to be bringing in more tones over the top. But the idea at the moment is just to cover in the background. You don't have to lean too hard with your sponge. When we're blending, we want to be kind of quite light with the sponge. If we go too hard, the colours will just mix and we won't get those different tones coming through. So with one of my corners, I'm going to dip into the dark blue and I'm going to do streaks. Very light streaks, so I'm not going to lean too hard because we still want that nice kind of dark tone coming through. So maybe in each side of your canvas, just have a nice kind of dark area. Okay, so when you're happy with your colour, I'm going to switch to my other side of the sponge and I'm going to kind of blend everything together to make it kind of nice and delicate and smooth. And again, I'm going up and down, very lightly, not too hard. So I'm just going to dip my sponge in my water just a little bit. and just give it a little squeeze. And then I'm going to dip back into the white because I want to create some kind of nice highlights. And same again, I'm going to do those kind of nice streaks. So I'm just keeping that white in the centre and leaving the dark in the sides. And then I'm going to find a kind of cleanish area of my sponge and just gently kind of blend that with the background. So when you're happy with your background, we'll wait for that to dry and then we'll continue painting. Okay, so next we're going to draw in where the umbrella is going to be. So I'm going to take my pencil and I'm going to find sort of quarter of the way up the canvas. And I'm going to start off by drawing a line, which is a few inches wide. And this is kind of going to be where the umbrella sits. So once you have your line drawn, we're going to find the halfway mark, which is around here. We can just draw a little mark there. And then we're going to draw in our handle. So our handle is going to be a kind of diagonal line. Okay, so we're going to make this line about 3 inches high to about there. And then we're just going to add a little curve for the handle of the umbrella. And then we're going to draw another diagonal line from the left coming upwards. And try to make it even on both sides, because this is going to be the top of our umbrella. And then we're going to draw a little kind of semicircle to meet the 2 points together. So now we have our kind of basic shape for our umbrella, and now we can go in and start creating kind of little dips that are going to be kind of the top of our umbrella, and you can add more shape. So I'm kind of doing 3 curves on each side and try and keep them as even as possible. So there we have our umbrella. So next we're going to paint the rain. So we need to mix up quite a light blue for this. So I'm going to take my small paintbrush and I'm going to take quite a lot of white. So really scoop it up and put it in the middle of your palette. And then I'm going to add just a touch of blue. So I'm just using the tip of the brush and I'm dipping into the blue. So not too much. We can also always add more as and when we need it. And then we're going to give that a good mix. And I'm just going to add a tiny bit more blue. And then once you're happy with your tone of blue, you can just take off some of the excess paint on the edge of your palette. And now we can start painting the rain. So for the rain, we're going to use very little strokes and very kind of loose strokes. We're not going to lean too hard onto the canvas. We're going to keep it quite light. So be quite delicate with your strokes. And also don't add too much paint either. So you might want to get a tissue and just take off some of the excess paint off of your brush, because you might want some kind of more faded strokes. Okay, so I'm just finishing off a few more raindrops, and now I'm going to wash my brush in my water and dry it off in my tissue. And I'm going to switch to my larger brush now, because we're going to do a nice kind of reflection at the bottom of the canvas underneath the umbrella. So I'm going to dip my brush in my water, and I'm going to take some blue and just pop a little bit into the palette next to it. And then I'm going to add a little bit more water to that, because we want to create an almost kind of watercolour effect. So it's going to be quite wet. And then kind of from this line, I'm going to go kind of up and down with my strokes. If it's too light, you can add a little bit more blue paint to your mix. Okay, so when you're happy with your reflection at the bottom, I'm just going to wash off my brush in my water and dry that off in my tissue. And then I'm going to switch back to my small brush again, because I'm going to do some kind of nice sweeping lines for my reflection underneath my umbrella. So I'm going to dip back into my light blue and then just take off a little bit of the excess on the edge of the palette. And then I'm going to paint in some nice kind of horizontal strokes underneath the umbrella. So I'm not leaning too hard with the brush, I'm going quite light. And then you can kind of go in between lines again with shorter strokes. And then towards the bottom you can be kind of really light with your brush. So I'm just going to wash off my brush, and we're going to add a little bit of white into our reflection. So I'm just going to dry that off in my tissue, and I'm going to dip into the white, and then kind of in between lines you can add little strokes of white. So I'm kind of just going underneath each line, so they're all kind of underneath each other. And then you can have some kind of just shorter strokes just at the bottom. Okay, so we're going to wait for our canvas to dry before we continue painting. So before we start painting in our umbrella, I'm just going to wash off my small brush in my water. And I'm going to dry that off in my tissue. So now I'm going to dip into the red, and we're going to start filling in our umbrella. So really take your time with this. So as you're filling in the red, you might notice that it's quite transparent. So we'll be adding another coat of red on top of this as well. So don't worry too much if you think it's too transparent at the moment. Okay, so that's our first coat of red. We're going to let that dry before we add on another coat over the top. So when our first layer of red is dry, we can add our second layer. So I'm going to dip into my red paint again. I'm going to get quite a lot of paint on my brush because we want it quite thick. And then I'm going to start adding my second layer of red. Don't worry too much about the outline of the umbrella at the moment. If you don't think it's too perfect right now, don't worry, because we're going to really kind of define it with our black paint later on. Okay, so I'm almost finished with my second layer of red. And we're going to let that dry before we start bringing in the black. So before we bring in the black outlines, I'm just going to rinse off my brush in the water and dry it off in a tissue. So I'm going to dip into the black paint, and I'm not going to take too much. I'm just going to dip the tip of the brush in. And then I'm going to start with the handle, and I'm going to work my way downwards. So really take your time with this. Make sure it's nice and precise. You also might want to add just a little bit of water to your brush as well, just so the paint spreads really easily and evenly. Okay, so once you've done the handle, we'll start outlining the rest of the umbrella. So again, you might want to just dip your brush in the water a little bit. And then I'm going to just start at the top of the umbrella, and I'm going to work my way downwards. So I'm going to start with these kind of curvy lines that we drew. Okay, so we've got the main outline of the umbrella. We're going to start to paint in some kind of more curvy lines to connect our kind of curvy strokes at the top with the base of the umbrella. So where your two lines kind of come up to a point, we're going to start at the top, and then we're going to paint in a curvy line coming downwards to kind of the center point of the base of the umbrella. Okay, so now we have outlined our umbrella. I'm going to add a few strokes of black in the reflection underneath. So we're going to kind of just redefine this sort of line that the umbrella is sitting on. So I've just added a bit of water to my brush. And I'm going to use kind of very loose, free strokes. I'm not pressing too hard. And I'm just going to redefine that pencil line that we drew at the beginning. So I'm just painting in these last couple of lines. And now I'm going to wash my paintbrush in my water. and wipe it onto my tissue. And I'm just going to add a couple of white highlights onto my umbrella. So I'm going to dip into the white, just a little bit, not too much. And I'm going to add a couple of strokes of white on top of the umbrella. So there we have our umbrella in the rain. I hope you enjoy painting Umbrella in the Rain with me today. If you want to paint more pictures, please check out more Prime Pass videos. We have a whole array of paintings for you to choose from, so I hope to see you in the next tutorial.